Welcome back, my friends, to the Art of Unlearning, and welcome to the YouTube channel. Today is one of those episodes where we're going to lovingly hold a mirror up to ourselves, to our decisions and our behaviors, all in an effort to make change happen. In today's topic, we're going to dive into the practicalities of subconscious reprogramming, particularly around love, including how you can intentionally design your life and how to recognize when you're living in response to past programming rather than in alignment with your authentic wants and needs and desires. What we're breaking down today is how to unlearn love as you know it so that you can align yourself with the kind of relationship that you actually want. I say love as you know it to mean as your subconscious knows it, possibly without you even realizing. It's so often, and too often really, that we live our lives in one toxic dynamic after another and allowing our inner child to run the show without really checking in to see if what's playing around us is A, what's best for us, or B, what we actually and authentically want. For some of us, we may have a history of jumping from relationship to relationship, becoming whoever that person wants us to be in order to secure security by way of love. Or we may experience the opposite, keeping others at arm's length to avoid feeling suffocated, even though we are craving a close connection. And of course, there is plenty of room to show up in between. Those are just kind of each end of the spectrum that I see in this work. Like everything else, these patterns began when we were too young to even realize that we were inheriting them. And they play out in our lives thanks to our subconscious beliefs and the protective mechanism of our nervous system. And I just want to add a little disclaimer here. They are the product of so much more than just our parents. As Louise Hayes says, we're all just victims of victims here. So our parents learned it from their parents learned it from their parents, and so on. Not to mention the cultural victimhood, the economic implications, just all of the epigenetic, cultural, environmental factors that go into it, and societal norms, expectations, what you read in magazines, what you hear about in books, what you see in movies. All of this will play into your understanding of love and of connection and of relationship dynamics. Attachment theory was originally coined by John Bowlby, who described attachment as the lasting psychological connectedness between human beings. The gist is, however our caregivers responded to our bids for affection determines how we show up in our relationships. Not just romantic, this can also apply to friendships, and honestly, I've even seen it down to our beliefs in the existence of anything outside of us, as in your relationship with the universe can be applied in attachment theory. So this is an invitation to notice. Do you push away certain potentially beneficial beliefs and push away romantic connection? Or do you overgive to anything that's outside of you while also over-sacrificing in romantic relationships, friend relationships, maybe also giving too much of yourself to your workplace dynamics just to solidify acceptance and safety? So the attachment style that is programmed into us at a very young age and that we grow into in adulthood tends to be one of four. The first is called secure attachment style. This is the ideal and looks like existing in a calm state with romantic relationships. You're comfortable in difficult conversations. You're able to move through challenge without extreme reactions. Anxious or ambivalent attachment style. This is for folks who tend to lose themselves in relationships, who say things like, life is just so much easier when I'm single, but also tend to find themselves in relationship after relationship. Avoidant dismissive attachment style. These are the folks who have extremely strict boundaries, though they may not always communicate them until it's too late. They come on strong and leave the moment things get too close. They don't really communicate well at all and aren't great with compromising or understanding, and they tend to feel suffocated really, really quickly. The fourth attachment style is disorganized attachment style. These folks have a lovely salad of both anxious and avoidant. They dance between the two, depending on how their partner is responding in the moment, and they're constantly trying to either earn love rather than be given it freely, or push it away in an effort to self-preserve. So attachment theory says, as an infant and child, you probably made bids for affection to your parents in one way or another. If a parent was cold or in any way came off uncaring in response, you likely developed a hyper-independent, avoidant attachment style. And if your caregivers were unreliable or inconsistent, that's where an anxious attachment develops. If they were responsive and attentive and made sure that you knew your needs mattered, a secure attachment style follows, where one truly believes it is safe to be loved and that they don't have to do anything to earn it. To me, the biggest indicator of a secure attachment style comes when Your partner can be experiencing something emotionally and you don't allow it to have an effect on you. Of course, you can empathize and you can relate to what they're feeling, but you're treading into anxious or avoidant territory when their moods cause you to either want to push away or cause you to try harder to earn love. Now, I have to emphasize again, this is not an opportunity to hate on our parents. There are tons of misguided cultural norms, like the cry it out theory, that are responsible for infants' cues not being met. It's our job as adults to work towards secure attachment with ourselves and with the world around us, not just so that we can have healthy relationships and call in a healthy dynamic, but so that we can feel safe in our own body. Because ultimately, humans do have an innate need for connection, despite what any hyperindependence might be telling you. And that connection being a point of stress is just unfair to do to you. You know you deserve better, I know you deserve better, and anyone who is dating you obviously wants you to show up as your healthy, whole, authentic self if they truly do love you for you. Now, here's the really good news. You can change your attachment style. It does not matter how long you were taught to respond in one way. You can always, always, always heal your brain and change your attachment style. Because your brain is incredibly malleable, and when you set your intention in one direction and practice loving awareness towards yourself, practice radical acceptance, and finally own radical responsibility, you can have anything you want in this lifetime. Yes, it takes effort. Yes, it's kind of emotionally intense, but you can do it, and you can live the life that you want to be living. You are not stuck living the life that you came from. Everything that we are talking about here roots back to a core wound, everything. And this is why affirmations, EFT, or my personal favorite, hypnosis, are all so incredibly effective, because the human baseline is connection. The human baseline is comfortability. The human baseline is community. It doesn't matter if you are straight or queer or polyamorous or monogamous. It does not matter what your personal preferences are. Every human on this planet craves emotional connection, and it is perfectly okay to accept that. All that matters is that you, 1, accept what you authentically desire, and 2, neutralize the past wounding that tells you you have to show up in one way or another. And that can be kind of tricky for a lot of people to accept. Let's take, for example, women who they come from a, stay-at-home mom who wanted to prioritize her children over her own career aspirations. But these women themselves are extremely driven and entrepreneurial and, and just gain a lot of energy and fuel from having that hustle mentality, But if they grew up with a mother who was very nurturing and very at home and very prioritizing her husband, it makes sense that they're going to energetically push away love, because authentically their desires say, I want to be ambitious, I want to be high achieving, I want to do these things. But if they're programmed to believe that you can't have that high drive and that ambition and that career while also being in a comfortable, safe relationship, they're probably going to choose the career, because they just haven't seen to believe yet that they can have the emotional connection they crave and the high achieving career that they crave. They probably haven't even seen an example of the kind of partner that they want that supports that kind of career aspiration. And so that's what we're really getting into today. We're going to examine where you came from. We're going to try to draw a line from where you came from to where you are now, and look at how you can unlearn love as you know it, so that you can align yourself with the kind of love you want to be experiencing. So let's get into some energetic blocks that come with 2 very important and common patterns. The first pattern is how we use love to satisfy a core wound, which we're going to call our loving invisibles. And the second pattern is how we avoid love to satisfy a core wound. So we're going to call those people our escaping heroes. Quick action step here. If or when you recognize yourself and your behaviors in what I'm talking about, it would be so valuable for you to start a note in your phone right now, or in your journal if you prefer. But I like to do this on my phone because I can have it immediately ready. You're going to start a new note in your phone and list out my pattern, and put some bullet points of ways that this shows up for you, so that you can start to recognize the behavior patterns, so that when you go in and reprogram your subconscious, it will immediately become obvious what you need to change, And you can start taking those action steps when that same dynamic presents itself again. And to communicate to the universe, no more of this, I'm moving on to this. So let's talk about the energetics of our loving invisibles, or the people who are using love to satisfy a core wound. This person, and I hate to call you out, may have a feeling of emptiness in them. They may crave approval and validation because only when they are communicated with praise will they feel safe. Quietness or neutrality feel like a threat in their body and feel like potential abandonment. If they're single, they may over-romanticize potential partners and potential friendships, all in an effort to protect themselves from the potential unsafe reality of what it is to be human. Because, like I said, we all crave connection, and for them, losing that connection is the biggest fear. So they're the friend who always has love on their mind, who always is seeking connection, the serial monogamist. And when a partner shows their flaws, as partners tend to do, they may quickly fall out of love and move on to the next hopeful. Or they may not even know what is and what is not a boundary for them and end up in a lengthy relationship full of self-sacrifice and losing themselves, all in an effort to maintain connection rather than face the terror of solitude. And the medicine for this person is obvious, right? It's spending time with themselves. It's learning to lean on themselves. It's reprogramming that ache and that emptiness so that they don't need that external validation to feel good about themselves. It's getting our loving hopefuls to the place where they know who they are and they like who they are, and no matter what happens, they know they're going to be fine because they have their own back. And when these people reach that place, it is magic because they will be the most loving and compassionate people that you know. And when they start setting boundaries in their loving and compassionate way, it's like magic. Manifestations instantly, all this magnetism, everything's flying in, and their life just falls into alignment. But when they're out of alignment, when they're heavily self-sacrificing, you can see and you can feel the way that their aura diminishes. It almost creates, if we put it into a tactile sensation, it's like the energetic is someone who has kind of a fragmented feeling to them. You can see the way that they shrink inside themselves. You can see the separation in their eyes and their soul when they're self-sacrificing rather than really tuning into what they authentically desire. They tend to be people who get walked all over, like literally and figuratively. I myself used to be this person, and one of the funniest changes in my energetic field when I cleared the validation block was when I went from being someone who would quite literally get stepped on and run into in public, like all the time, people would just run into me, to now being someone that just doesn't happen to. Friends pointed out all the time because if I'm walking down a sidewalk, there's like this aura around me where people move out of the way on the sidewalk. But before, like, not only would friends and relationships walk all over me and jobs walk all over me, it was literally strangers on the sidewalk would run into me and step on me and just not see me. Doesn't happen anymore. It's like magic. As children, the loving invisibles were likely to be very sensitive, very compassionate, but also probably not fully seen in their authenticity. So they likely craved for someone to see them for who they are, to appreciate them, even just to get to be a companion to someone. And all this core wound wants, if you're a loving invisible, all your inner child is seeking is true companionship, to have your needs met and to have your voice heard. And you just can't really do that if you're constantly settling and self-sacrificing, can you? And the medicine for them is find your sense of independence, know who you are, get very clear on your wants and needs, and trust that you are allowed to communicate them. And don't settle if they're not accepted. Now let's move on to our next group, who I call the Flighty Heroes, or those who avoid love to satisfy a core wound. Our Flighty Heroes are the child who was born just brilliant and shiny and magnetic right from the jump. But they probably were told over and over again that they were too much, that they should dim their shine, or that they're making other people emotional by being too out there, too bright, too shiny. Basically, the messaging that this person received over and over again said they are responsible for other people's emotions. They learned early on that it is best to avoid connection altogether because to be too intertwined with someone else is to be trapped. These people likely know who they are and may or may not like who they are, but they have no interest in losing their freedom to others. Their biggest fear is in losing their freedom to others. Rather than being uncertain about who they are or feeling the need to sacrifice their authenticity in order to appease others and maintain connection, our flighty heroes know who they are, and their biggest fear is to lose their sense of self by way of suffocation and connection. So they learned early on that it is best to avoid connection altogether, because to be too intertwined with someone else is to be trapped. They likely know who they are, and they may or may not like who they are, but they have no interest in losing their freedom to others. Even if there's a part of them that is craving connection, even if there's a part of them that feels so deeply lonely, they still would rather live with that ache than risk the heartache of knowing that they caused someone else pain, or the entrapment of, I can't leave because then I'll hurt this person. Deep down, this person is so sensitive and so compassionate, but to them, it's much better to abandon the part that wants connection than have to fight for their independence again. So this person oftentimes shows up as someone who will find flaws before they even know someone. They will have a very hard time getting intimate with others deeper than friendship or sexual relationships. And they may also be the type who is scared to be in relationships because they're so deeply afraid of hurting others. Now, the medicine for this person is kind of tricky, because if mishandled, they can harm themselves and others by trying to force their way into a relationship and force the upper hand and say, I'm not compromising on my boundaries, I'm not compromising on what I want. And if they end up with someone who is prone to self-abandoning, that's setting them up for a lifetime of being someone who, yes, gets what they want, but never really experiences true emotional connection, because all they're doing is forcing the other person to self-abandon. And eventually, they may still end up leaving when the other person has boundaries and preferences that don't match theirs, which obviously is ideally inevitable, because that's like part of being two different people who merge into one relationship. Really, the medicine here is not to make any relationship happen necessarily, but instead to seek more compromise and more nuance. So can we try finding romantic connection with someone, even if we're afraid we may end up wanting to abandon them? Even if we don't know whether or not we like them, can we agree to the second date? Can we acknowledge the fear of entrapment and try to sit with that discomfort and just see what happens on the other side when we still lean into connection? Can we even try to go so far as to voice when we feel the need to run away coming up? Can we try to self-isolate less and open ourselves up to the possibility that others will take care of us? Can we willingly express and communicate and acknowledge our flaws and trust ourselves and others to accept them? Because when the flighty hero leans into their love and compassion and opens themselves up, they are the most inspiring leaders. And that's why I like to call them the flighty heroes. Yes, they want to bail, but deep down, they are heroic. They're the ones who are so thoughtful, who will be very clear and succinct in their communication, leaving no terrifying gray area for anyone trying to get through their anxious attachment. They're the ones who will teach us all that it's okay to communicate our wants and needs and that we are allowed to voice them. And when they can get the compromise thing down, they'll be the ones to teach you to never, ever, ever self-abandon. And when they get the compromise thing down, it's like the floodgates open and suddenly all of these things they've been holding at arm's length that are actually the thing that they want just come rushing in. They are a force to be reckoned with, and they are so strong and so loving and so brilliant in their magnetism, because they're the people who are not going to settle for less than they deserve. But when they can get the compromise thing down, they might realize, these things that I've been wanting have been right here this whole time. I've just been too afraid to connect with them. So those are our two archetypes that we're seeing most often when it comes to core wounds and love. And it is totally okay if you identify with more than one of these. I know I've swung between the two extremes in my own healing journey and have been able to pull from different elements of these archetypes, even if I do tend to default to one over the other. I like to exercise the strength and the courage of our flighty heroes while staying in touch with the compassion of the loving invisible. So eventually you do reach a middle point where you realize how great compromise can be and how compromise can open your eyes to things you didn't even realize were possible, while at the same time maintaining those strong boundaries and maintaining what you know to be true about yourself and accepting that you are who you are regardless of what others around you say or think or feel. Both of these archetypes have the same healing journey, which is to acknowledge and take responsibility for the ways that our maladaptive coping mechanisms may be getting in the way of our authentic desires. Learn to communicate, even if it's in your own unique way, even if your voice is shaking, even if it terrifies you, you have to learn how to communicate. And learn how to set boundaries in a healthy way and truly learn compromise. Obviously, they're going to be coming from different ends of the spectrum as they learn compromise, but they both need to master compromise. For one, learn to compromise more on their own behalf, and the other, learn how to compromise more on their partner or partner's behalf without it having to mean anything about them. All with the knowledge that we deserve secure love. We deserve healthy love. We deserve love that says, with or without you, I will be okay, but I am choosing to lean into this, to lean towards you, because I know I deserve to experience the beauty of true intimacy, truly being seen, truly being celebrated, and so do you, because that is our inherent right as humans on this planet. And that's really what the truth of a healthy dynamic is, right? It's not that we never experience conflict, it's that we know what is a yes and what is a no for us personally. We know how to navigate gray area. We know how to manage our emotions. We know how to take ownership. And we know that life starts and ends with us, our actions, and our emotions. And however we show up is going to ultimately impact what happens next. A healthy dynamic, a healthy relationship, whether you are straight or queer or poly or monogamous, a healthy dynamic is people who take responsibility for their own shit. That doesn't mean that you and your partner will both have that down the moment you enter the relationship at all. In fact, you probably have to practice it in a relationship. But to me, truly healthy relationships are not one where two people are perfect. They're ones where issues can be addressed and transformation can take place. Because no human on this earth is going to be perfect. Perfection is subjective. But when you're with someone who you can say, hey, it doesn't feel good in my body when you do this, and be met with loving compassion and responsibility, that's a healthy dynamic. But above all else, when you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, it doesn't feel good in my body when you self-abandon. Hey, it doesn't feel good in my body when you push people away. When we can have that come to Jesus with ourselves, that's where true relationships happen. Not in the other person, not in the other person's behavior, not in the other person's actions, but in you making a well-informed decision and then acting according to your own values and to your own preferences and to your own loyalty, even if that means calling yourself out on your shit. It is perfectly okay to need time for these wounds to heal. It is perfectly okay to constantly have to check yourself. And it's even okay to revert back to that pattern you're trying to unlearn, especially if you just don't have the energy to practice a new neural pathway in that moment. Because when you take the time to seek out a partner who has compassion for your patterns and who wants to be better for themselves too, compromise is just always going to come. Love is always going to be restored. You may find it in yourself, in that fierce protectiveness, or you may be lovingly given it by a partner ready to face their own patterns. But one way or another, connection is your birthright. And all the universe wants is to bring us back to that whole, deserving, authentic self, the one that you came to this planet as, who knows innately the power of connection, both with themselves and with others. So for those wanting actionables on using neuroplasticity to manifest love and to find that partnership, check out my YouTube bonus episode where I'll be sitting down with you. We'll pull out your journal, a nice pen, and we'll go through a step-by-step on how to do this. If you would like action steps on turning your existing relationship into one that has more connection using neuroplasticity and using inner child reprogramming, just let me know. You can either send me a DM on Instagram or leave a comment on YouTube, but I would love to dig further into that if that's something that people are craving or looking for. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.